Heinrich Schliemann was a German businessman and a pioneer of field archaeology. He was an advocate of the historical reality of places mentioned in the works of Homer. Schliemann was an archaeological excavator of Hissarlik, now presumed to be the site of Troy, along with the Mycenaean sites Mycenae and Tiryns. His work lent weight to the idea that Homer's Iliad and Virgil's Aeneid reflect actual historical events. Schliemann's excavation of 9 levels of archaeological remains with dynamite has been criticized as destructive of significant historical artifacts, including the level that is believed to be the historical Troy. Along with Arthur Evans, Schliemann was a pioneer in the study of Aegean civilization in the Bronze Age. The two men knew of each other, Evans having visited Schliemann's sites. Schliemann had planned to excavate at Knossos, but died before fulfilling that dream. Evans bought the site and stepped in to take charge of the project, which was then still in its infancy. Childhood and youth: Schliemann was born in Neubuchow, Mecklenburg-Schwerin in 1822. His father, Ernst Schliemann, was a Protestant minister. The family moved to Aegean in 1823. Heinrich's mother, Therese Sophie, died in 1831, when Heinrich was 9 years old. After his mother's death, his father sent Heinrich to live with his uncle. When he was 11 years old, his father paid for him to enroll in the gymnasium at Neustrelitz. Heinrich's later interest in history was initially encouraged by his father, who had schooled him in the tales of the Iliad and the Odyssey and had given him a copy of Ludwig Gerhard's illustrated History of the World for Christmas in 1829. Schliemann later claimed that at the age of 8, he had declared he would one day excavate the city of Troy. However, Heinrich had to transfer to the Realschule after his father was accused of embezzling church funds and had to leave that institution in 1836 when his father was no longer able to pay for it. His family's poverty made a university education impossible, so it was Schliemann's early academic experiences that influenced the course of his education as an adult. In his archaeological career, however, there was often a division between Schliemann and the educated professionals. At age 14, after leaving Realschule, Heinrich became an apprentice at Herrhauser's grocery in far one quarter Rustenburg. He later told that his passion for Homer was born when he heard a drunkard reciting it at the grocer's. He labored for 5 years, until he was forced to leave because he burst a blood vessel lifting a heavy barrel. In 1841, Schliemann moved to Hamburg and became a cabin boy on the Dorothea, a steamer bound for Venezuela. After 12 days at sea, the ship foundered in a gale. The survivors washed up on the shores of the Netherlands. Schliemann became a messenger, office attendant, and later, a bookkeeper in Amsterdam. Career and family. On March 1, 1844, 22-year-old Schliemann took a position with B.H. Schroeparagraph der & Co., an import-export firm. In 1846 the firm sent him as a general agent to St. Petersburg. In time, Schliemann represented a number of companies. He learned Russian and Greek, employing a system that he used his entire life to learn languages. Schliemann claimed that it took him 6 weeks to learn a language and wrote his diary in the language of whatever country he happened to be in. By the end of his life, he could converse in English, French, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Swedish, Polish, Italian, Greek, Latin, Russian, Arabic, and Turkish as well as German. Schliemann's ability with languages was an important part of his career as a businessman in the importing trade. In 1850, Heinrich learned of the death of his brother, Ludwig, who had become wealthy as a speculator in the California goldfields. Schliemann went to California in early 1851 and started a bank in Sacramento, buying and reselling over $1 million of gold dust in just 6 months. When the local Rothschild agent complained about short weight consignments, he left California, pretending it was because of illness. While he was there, California became the 31st state in September 1850 and Schliemann acquired United States citizenship. According to his memoirs, before arriving in California he dined in Washington with President Millard Fillmore and his family, but Eric Klein says that he didn't attend but simply read about it in the papers. He also published what he said was an eyewitness account of the San Francisco fire of 1851, which he said was in June although it took place in May. At the time he was actually in Sacramento and used the report of the fire in the Sacramento Daily Journal to write his report. On April 7, 1852, he sold his business and returned to Russia. There he attempted to live the life of a gentleman, which brought him into contact with Ekaterina Lyon, the niece of one of his wealthy friends. Schliemann had previously learned his childhood sweetheart, Minna, had married. Heinrich and Ekaterina married on October 12, 1852. The marriage was troubled from the start. Schliemann next cornered the markets in indigo dye and then went into the indigo business itself, turning a good profit. Ekaterina and Heinrich had a son, Sergei, and two daughters, Natalia and Nadezhda, born in 1855, 1858 and 1861 respectively. Schliemann made yet another quick fortune as a military contractor in the Crimean War, 1854–1856. He cornered the markets in saltpeter, sulfur, and lead, constituents of ammunition, which he resold to the Russian government. By 1858, Schliemann was wealthy enough to retire. In his memoirs, he claimed that he wished to dedicate himself to the pursuit of Troy. As a consequence of his many travels, Schliemann was often separated from his wife and small children. He spent a month studying at the Sorbonne in 1866, while moving his assets from St. Petersburg to Paris to invest in real estate. He asked his wife to join him, but she refused. Schliemann threatened to divorce Ekaterina twice before actually doing so. He claimed to have utilized the divorce laws of Indiana in 1869, although he obtained the divorce by lying about his residency. Life as an archaeologist, Schliemann's first interest of a classical nature seems to have been the location of Troy. At the time Schliemann began excavating in Turkey, the site commonly believed to be Troy was at Par ± Narbor ±, a hilltop at the south end of the Trojan Plain. The site had been previously excavated by archaeologist and local expert, Frank Calvert. Schliemann performed soundings at Par ± Narbor ±, but was disappointed by his findings. It was Calvert who identified Hissarlik as Troy and suggested Schliemann dig there on land owned by Calvert's family. In 1868, Schliemann visited sites in the Greek world, published Ithaca, Der Peloponnesus und Troja, in which he asserted that Hissarlik was the site of Troy, and submitted a dissertation in ancient Greek proposing the same thesis to the University of Rostock. In 1869, he was awarded a Ph.D. in absentia from the University of Rostock for that submission. David Trail wrote that the examiners gave him his Ph.D. on the basis of his topographical analysis of Ithaca, which were in part simply translations of another author's work or drawn from poetic descriptions by the same author. Schliemann was at first skeptical about the identification of Hissarlik with Troy, but was persuaded by Calvert and took over Calvert's excavations on the eastern half of the Hissarlik site. The Turkish government owned the western half. Calvert became Schliemann's collaborator and partner. Schliemann needed an assistant who was knowledgeable in matters pertaining to Greek culture. As he had divorced Ekaterina in 1869, he advertised for a wife in a newspaper in Athens. A friend, the Archbishop of Athens, suggested a relative of his, 17-year-old Sophia Ingastromenos. Schliemann, age 47, married her in October 1869, despite the 30-year difference in age. They later had two children, Andromache and Agamemnon Schliemann. He reluctantly allowed them to be baptized, but solemnized the ceremony in his own way by placing a copy of the Iliad on the children's heads and reciting 100 hexameters. Schliemann began work on Troy in 1871. His excavations began before archaeology had developed as a professional field. Thinking that Homeric Troy must be in the lowest level, Schliemann and his workers dug hastily through the upper levels, reaching fortifications that he took to be his target. In 1872, he and Calvert fell out over this method. Schliemann was angry when Calvert published an article stating that the Trojan War period was missing from the site's archaeological record. Priam's treasure. A cache of gold and other objects appeared in May 1873. Schliemann named it Priam's treasure. He later wrote that he had seen the gold glinting in the dirt and dismissed the workmen so that he and Sophia could excavate it themselves, removing it in her shawl. However, Schlieman's oft-repeated story of the treasure being carried by Sophia in her shawl was untrue. Schliemann later admitted fabricating it. At the time of the discovery, Sophia was in fact with her family in Athens, following the death of her father. Sophia later wore the jewels of Helen for the public. Those jewels, taken from the Pergamon Museum in Berlin by the Soviet Army in 1945, are now in the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. Schliemann published his findings in 1874, in Trojanish Altar to 1/4 mare. This publicity backfired when the Turkish government revoked Schliemann's permission to dig and sued him for a share of the gold. Collaborating with Calvert, Schliemann smuggled the treasure out of Turkey. He defended his smuggling in Turkey as an attempt to protect the items from corrupt local officials. Priam's treasure today remains a subject of international dispute. Schliemann published Trojan's same ruin in 1875 and excavated the treasury of Mycenaean at Orchomenus. In 1876, he began digging at Mycenae. Upon discovering the shaft graves, with their skeletons and more regal gold, Schliemann cabled the King of Greece. The results were published in Mycenae in 1878. Although he had received permission in 1876 to continue excavation, Schliemann did not reopen the dig site at Troy until 1878–1879, after another excavation in Ithaca designed to locate an actual site mentioned in the Odyssey. This was his second excavation at Troy. Emil Bernhoff and Rudolf Virchow joined him there in 1879. Schliemann made a third excavation at Troy in 1882–1883, an excavation of Tiryns with Wilhelm Dar paragraph a PFELD in 1884, a fourth excavation at Troy, also with Dar paragraph a PFELD, in 1888–1890. Death. On August 1, 1890, Schliemann returned reluctantly to Athens, and in November travelled to Halle, where his chronic ear infection was operated upon, on November 13. The doctors deemed the operation a success, but his inner ear became painfully inflamed. Ignoring his doctor's advice, he left the hospital and travelled to Leipzig, Berlin, and Paris. From the latter, he planned to return to Athens in time for Christmas, but his ear condition became even worse. Too sick to make the boat ride from Naples to Greece, Schliemann remained in Naples, but managed to make a journey to the ruins of Pompeii. On Christmas Day he collapsed into a coma and died in a Naples hotel room on December 26, 1890. The cause of death was cholesteatoma. His corpse was then transported by friends to the first cemetery in Athens. It was interred in a mausoleum shaped like a temple erected in ancient Greek style designed by Ernst Ziller in the form of a pedimental sculpture. The frieze circling the outside of the mausoleum shows Schliemann conducting the excavations at Mycenae and other sites. His magnificent residence in the city centre of Athens, the Iliad Melathron, houses today the Numismatic Museum of Athens. Criticisms. Further excavation of the Troy site by others indicated that the level he named the Troy of the Iliad was inaccurate, although they retain the names given by Schliemann. In an article for the Classical World, D.F. Easton writes that Schliemann was not very good at separating fact from interpretation. He goes on to claim that even in 1872 Frank Calvert could see from the pottery that Troy too had to be hundreds of years too early to be the Troy of the Trojan War, a point finally proved by the discovery of Mycenaean pottery in Troy 6 in 1890. King Priam's treasure was found in the Troy II level, that of the early Bronze Age, long before Priam's city of Troy 6 or Troy Baiaia in the prosperous and elaborate Mycenaean age. Moreover, the finds were unique. The elaborate gold artifacts do not appear to belong to the early Bronze Age. His excavations were condemned by later archaeologists as having destroyed the main layers of the real Troy. Kenneth W. Harlan, The Teaching Company's Great Ancient Civilizations of Asia Minor lecture series, sarcastically claims that Schliemann's excavations were carried out with such rough methods that he did to Troy what the Greeks couldn't do in their times, destroying and leveling down the entire city walls to the ground. In 1972, Professor William Calder of the University of Colorado, speaking at a commemoration of Schliemann's birthday, claimed that he had uncovered several possible problems in Schliemann's work. Other investigators followed, such as Professor David Trail of the University of California. An article published by the National Geographic Society called into question Schlieman's qualifications, his motives, and his methods. In northwestern Turkey, Heinrich Schliemann excavated the site believed to be Troy in 1870. Schliemann was a German adventurer and con man who took sole credit for the discovery, even though he was digging at the site, called Hissarlik, at the behest of British archaeologist Frank Calvert. Eager to find the legendary treasures of Troy, Schliemann blasted his way down to the second city, where he found what he believed were the jewels that once belonged to Helen. As it turns out, the jewels were 1,000 years older than the time described in Homer's epic. Another article presented similar criticisms when reporting on a speech by University of Pennsylvania scholar C. Brian Rose. German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann was the first to explore the Mound of Troy in the 1870s. Unfortunately, he had had no formal education in archaeology, and dug an enormous trench which we still call the Schliemann Trench, according to Rose, because in the process Schliemann he destroyed a phenomenal amount of material Only much later in his career would he accept the fact that the treasure had been found at a lair 1,000 years removed from the battle between the Greeks and Trojans, and thus that it could not have been the treasure of King Priam. Schliemann may not have discovered the truth, but the publicity stunt worked, making Schliemann and the site famous and igniting the field of Homeric studies in the late 19th century. Schliemann's methods have been described as savage and brutal. He plowed through layers of soil and everything in them without proper records keeping no mapping of finds, few descriptions of discoveries. Carl Blegen forgave his recklessness, saying although there were some regrettable blunders, those criticisms are largely colored by a comparison with modern techniques of digging. But it is only fair to remember that before 1876 very few persons, if anyone, yet really knew how excavations should properly be conducted. There was no science of archaeological investigation, and there was probably no other digger who was better than Schliemann in actual field work. Bibliography. L'Archine et la Japan Temps pra copyright Cent, Ithaca, der Peloponnesus und Troja, Trojanisch Alterta 1/4 Mer, Bereicht a 1/4 Bear Dioscribungen in Troja, Trojan Seine Ruin. Translated into English Troy and its Remains, Mycenae. Translated into English Mycenae, a narrative of researchers and discoverers at Mycenae and Tiryns, Ilios, city and country of the Trojans, ôtermenos, Bereicht a 1/4 Bear Dioscribungen in bar paragraph Otischen ôtermenos, Tiryns, der Pra-Currency Historisch Palast der Car paragraph Nike von Tiryns. Translated into English Tiryns, the prehistoric palace of the kings of Tiryns, Bereicht a 1/4 Bear Dioscribungen in Troja im Jahr 1890. In popular culture, Schliemann is the subject of Irving Stone's novel The Greek Treasure. Stone's book is the basis for the German television production Der Geheimnis Vollschatz von Troja from 2007. He is also the subject of the novel The Lost Throne by American author Chris Ksky. The novel The Fall of Troy by Peter Ackroyd is based on Schliemann's excavation of Troy. Schliemann is portrayed as Heinrich Obermann. See also, List of archaeologists, references, notes. Further reading, Boston, Daniel. The Discoverers. Random House. ISBN A0-394-40229-4, Durant, Will. The Life of Greece, Being a History of Greek Civilization from the Beginnings, and of Civilization in the Near East from the Death of Alexander, to the Roman Conquest. Simon & Schuster. OCLCA 355,696,346 Easton, D.F. Heinrich Schliemann, Hero or Fraud? The Classical World 91, 335 doi, 10.2307/4352100 Tour, Poole, Lynn. Poole, Gray. One Passion, Two Loves. Crowell. OCLCA 284,890A. Silberman, Neil Asher. Between Past and Present, Archaeology, Ideology, and Nationalism in the Modern Middle East. New York, Doubleday. ISBN A0-385-41610-5. Tolstikov, Vladimir. Trieste, Mikhail. The Gold of Troy. Searching for Homer's Fabled City. Harry N. Abrams. ISBN A0-8109-3394-2. Trail, David A. Ʃliːman of Troy, Treasure and Deceit. New York, St. Martin's Press. ISBN A0-312-14042-8. Wood, Michael. In Search of the Trojan War. New American Library. ISBN A0-452-25960-6. External links, media related to Heinrich Schliemann at Wikimedia Commons, works written by or about Heinrich Schliemann at Wikisource, works by Heinrich Schliemann at Project Gutenberg, works by or about Heinrich Schliemann at Internet Archive, American School of Classical Studies at Athens. Heinrich Schliemann and Family Papers at the Wayback Machine. Chisholm, Hugh, ed. Schliemann, Heinrich. Encyclopædia Britannica. Cambridge University Press. A. Schliemann, Heinrich. Encyclopædia Americana. 1920 A.